Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're looking at demystifying woodworking, specifically the power of single-piece projects. Woodworking is just this beautiful craft, but man, standing in front of a giant pile of lumber and razor-sharp tools, it can be incredibly intimidating. So let's look at a method that's literally designed to build your skills the right way, making sure your very first project is a total success rather than a frustrating disaster.
We really have to start by asking the tough question here. Why do so many beginners quit before they've even really begun? Well, imagine stepping into a workshop for the very first time, right? You're trying to build, say, a cabinet or a chair. Suddenly, boom, you are slammed with a barrage of highly technical challenges. Joinery fitting, clamping, glue-ups. It's just a chaotic rush. You're trying to make sure a mortise and tenon fit perfectly together while simultaneously rushing before your wood glue dries into literal stone, only to realize your clamps are, 2 inches too short? The pace is frantic, the variables are just endless, and the overwhelm is absolutely real. Honestly, it's a perfect recipe for throwing your hands up and walking away from the workbench forever.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because when you start with complex assemblies, like a chaotic pile of clamped wood, you aren't actually learning the craft. You're really just endlessly troubleshooting. You're managing clamping pressure and fighting glue-ups. But shift your focus over to a single-piece project. This is a totally calm, manageable environment. Instead of fighting the wood and fighting the clock, you are given the breathing room to actually learn your tools and focus strictly on your technique. It's kind of like the difference between trying to juggle chainsaws on day one versus learning to just toss a single tennis ball. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Well, a single-piece project is exactly what it sounds like. We're talking about something like a classic cutting board, crafted entirely from one solid piece of wood. I want you to really think about the beauty of this definition. By keeping it to one single piece, we completely eliminate those early frustrations we were just talking about. And the absolute golden rule of learning any new mechanical skill is this: fewer variables equals easier learning. When you take the stress of making two separate pieces fit perfectly together completely out of the equation, your brain is finally free to focus on the piece of wood sitting right in front of you.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact journey you need to take. First, you learn to measure and mark accurately. Second, you're making straight, square cuts. Third, sanding those surfaces flat and smooth. And finally, applying a food-safe finish. Now, these aren't just the steps to make a cutting board. These are the foundational mechanics used in nearly every single woodworking project you will ever build in your lifetime. By walking through this chronological process on just one board, you're mastering the exact same skills you'll eventually use to build, say, a dining room table or a custom bookshelf. You're just doing it in a highly controlled, totally stress-free environment.
And this simplicity naturally builds into another incredibly important topic, and that's your safety in the workshop. A workshop is full of tools that, quite frankly, command respect. The beautiful thing about simpler projects is that they naturally reduce the need for advanced or potentially dangerous operations. You absolutely don't need to learn how to route complex profiles or use a dado stack on a table saw right out of the gate. A single-piece project allows you to learn safe tool handling at a very comfortable pace. You really get to feel how the tool vibrates, how it sounds, and how it responds, all without the anxiety of executing some highly complex maneuver.
Now, even though we're keeping things simple, you're actually still learning the deep secrets of the material. Wood is an organic, living thing, right? And it behaves in very specific ways. Working on just one piece teaches you how to truly read the wood grain. You'll physically feel the hardness of the species you chose, and you'll learn how cutting and sanding in different directions can completely change your result. And honestly, the best part? You learn all of these critical factors entirely without the overwhelming headache of trying to manage how wood expands and contracts across complicated joints or large glued-up panels. Basically, you get the education without the penalty.
And speaking of penalties, let's talk about the reality of making mistakes. Because you're going to make them. We all do. But single-piece projects inherently use less material and require fewer tools. And let's be real, hardwood is super expensive these days. If you're building a massive complex assembly and you make a mistake, you might ruin hundreds of dollars of lumber. But with a single piece, the risk practically plummets. Your mistakes become incredibly cheap and vastly easier to recover from.
I mean, think about how reassuring this thought is. A bad cut might mean trimming an edge, not scrapping an entire glued assembly. Think about the freedom that gives you. If your saw wanders, say, a millimeter off the line on your cutting board, who cares? You just sand it flush or trim the board slightly smaller. Nobody will ever know. Mastering this one piece safely unlocks the psychology of success. You completely remove the fear of making an unrecoverable, hugely expensive error, which allows you to just be relaxed and confident with your tools. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this entire approach creates a massive psychological win. As human beings, we just need positive reinforcement to stick with the new habit.
Completing a project quickly provides a huge motivational boost. Instead of toiling away in the garage for 6 months before you have literally anything to show for it, a single-piece project, like a cutting board, can be finished in a weekend. Boom! You suddenly have a highly usable, beautiful, gift-worthy result right in your hands. You could literally serve dinner on it that night. That tangible reward boosts your confidence and skyrockets your interest in progressing to the next level.
So the crucial point is this. Starting simple is not a limitation. It's a launchpad. Just look at these ultimate payoffs. You get to practice the absolute essentials. You gain real, unshakable confidence. You actually get to enjoy the success of a finished product super early on. By stripping away the chaos of complex joinery and glue-ups, you're creating a rock-solid foundation. This approach is going to keep you highly motivated and properly prepared to take on that advanced work when the time is absolutely right.
Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. We've seen how focusing on a single manageable project strips away the overwhelm, protects your wallet, builds your core skills, and delivers a fast, beautiful victory. The path to complex mastery really does begin with a single simple step. So if mastering just one piece of wood truly unlocks the foundation of this entire incredible craft, what will your first cut be? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Grab some safety glasses and go make some sawdust.